That was a lovely start to our session. Good morning, everyone. My name is Nadine Grant, and I'm the Vice President of International Programs and Business Development at Plan Canada. Thank you very much for coming to this event. On behalf of Plan and the co-organizers, World Food Programme and Dubai Cares, I'd like to thank you for joining this discussion on ensuring that learning continues, delivering education in emergencies. We will be finishing at about 1 p.m. given the late start, and we have some of our speakers that are going to have to leave us early, so we're running with time here. As we speak, there are some 75 million girls and boys living in crisis situations who lack access to education, including 17 million refugee and internally displaced children. While these numbers can be numbing, we hear them all the time, they are very real for the young girls and boys living through these protracted crises. In Syria, in Afghanistan, South Sudan, Central African Republic, to name just a few. In Syria, 6 years of conflict, 2 million children are out of school. Although each crisis is unique, they almost always make girls more vulnerable. Girls are exposed to gender-based violence in refugee camps, face increased risks from child marriage, sexual violence, and trafficking, fundamental violations of their human rights. They are 2.5 times more likely to be out of school than boys in times of crisis. We know that learning environments can indeed provide a safe place to protect girls and boys from violence and help them to recover from trauma, supporting them to gain new skills they need to rebuild their countries in the future, and indeed can be a place to build global citizens. Despite the fact that children and parents themselves consistently prioritize education above all else, a mere 2% of humanitarian funding goes towards education. There continues to be a common yet narrow perception that education can wait. It's a nice to have, but real emergency efforts such as food, water, shelter, and sanitation must take precedence in funding and in delivery. Given that most protracted crises last more than 20 years, and that there were over 35 protracted crises at the end of 2015, the issue of education continuity during emergencies is as relevant today as it has ever been. I think that everyone in this room would call themselves a global citizen. We may point to moments in our lives when that call to action ignited. Perhaps that led you to make certain career choices or focus on personal philanthropic commitments. Our expert panelists will share with you both personal and professional experiences in the area of education and emergencies that led them to become the extraordinary global citizens that they are today. I'll go first. My personal story starts in Paktia, Afghanistan in 1995. The country was in conflict between warring Mujahideen factions, and a new group, known as the Taliban, had taken control of the province. The community consultation work I'd been doing with CARE Afghanistan indicated that health and education were huge priorities. There was no functioning Ministry of Education Services at the time. Most schools were reduced to rubble, and it was generally the boys who did attend. Wanting to ensure continuity of education for girls in villages nearby, we'd been able to negotiate that CARE helped set up schools for girls using local homes as safe places for school. We used a simple curriculum, trained local educators. UNICEF came on board to fund these pilot home schools, and the pilot proved successful. Years later, when the Taliban took over most of the country, these small home schools that had quietly been tested and proven spread throughout the country. A committed development worker, I later left Afghanistan for other postings, but this moment, connecting to some of the most vulnerable young women, young girls, with the power of education, has never left me. 20 years later, I'm happy to think that some of those young girls in those homeschools went on to become their own global citizens and are today young leaders in their communities. This session will examine the issue of what needs to be done to ensure continuity of education in times of crisis by discussing this issue from different vantage points. We'll look at it from the systems, the stories, the students, and the solutions. We will examine what needs to happen within the education system to accommodate the stress that comes with large influx of refugees in times of conflict. We will then turn to stories of courage and resilience that have inspired us to make a difference in providing education in times of crisis. We'll examine some proven solutions to addressing the issue and end with a student refugee's own view on the topic. And then we'll have time for some question and answers. I'd like to take this opportunity also to thank Sunny Varkey, Vikas Poida, and the Varkey Foundation for giving us this platform today at this extraordinary conference. You will receive the summary of the bio, so I'll make brief introductions. And just in time, we have Miss Irina Bokova, who requires no introduction, but if you don't know, Irina Bokova has been the Director General of UNESCO since November 2009. She has served as Executive Secretary of the Steering Committee of the UN General's Global Education First Initiative. She's fluent in 5 languages, a vocal advocate of European unity, gender parity, and education. His Excellency, Mr. Elias Boussab, was the Minister of Education and Higher Education in Lebanon from February 2014 to December 2016. Minister Boussab also co-founded the American University in Dubai, the first US-accredited university in the region, and has overseen its development into one of the premier institutions of higher education. As Minister of Education, Boussab was charged with overseeing the Lebanese education system and managing the pressing challenges created by the influx of Syrian refugees that nearly doubled the school-going population in Lebanon. Mr. Ron Alves, who you've already heard, his lovely violin and singing talents, comes from one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in Caracas, the capital of Venezuela. Ron worked as a teacher trainer in Venezuela to promote El Sistema teaching method, and later became an international teacher training in this approach. Ron is also one of the 2017 Global Teacher Prize Top 50 recipients. Mr. Carlo Scaramella is the Deputy Regional Director of the Regional Bureau for North Africa, Middle East, Central Asia, and Eastern Europe for the World Food Programme. He's currently based in Cairo. With a doctorate in political science from Italy, he spent half of his professional career in challenging humanitarian and development settings in Africa, Latin America, and the Middle East. Mr. Ramin Anis. Ramin is a Syrian swimmer who now resides in Belgium. He competed in the 2016 Summer Olympics in Rio de Janeiro. As war took hold of his hometown of Aleppo, Remy fled to Turkey by dinghy to Greece and to Belgium. His uncle Majad inspired him to become a swimmer. And finally, last but not least, His Excellency Mr. Tariq Algerg. Tariq Algerg was appointed Chief Executive Officer of Dubai Cares in 2009 and has been responsible for strategically defining and leading the organization that's dedicated towards providing children in developing countries access to primary quality education. Algerg has enabled Dubai Cares to contribute to the global evidence base of education, leveraging funding and investment in strategic relationships that have supported the development of the worldwide interventions, such as the UN Secretary's Global Education First Initiative and the Brookings Institute's Learning Metrics Task Force. I present to you our extraordinary panel. I would like to now invite His Excellency Mr. Elias Boussab for his remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I'm sorry if I had to go first and rush to the airport right after this session. I hope I can still catch the plane. I was asked to come and speak here today about education in emergencies, which is something that I have experienced during my 2 years and 10 months as Minister of Education in Lebanon. At the time when the crisis, because of the Syrian refugees, was at its highest in Lebanon. I was asked to take on this post without realizing the challenges that were ahead. Just to give you a small example of the situation and how difficult it was for us. Lebanon is a country of 4 million people. We had about 500,000 Palestinian refugees who came many years back to Lebanon, and they were supposed to be there on a temporary basis, and they still live in camps until today. Then the Syrian war started. Now we have 1.5 million Syrian refugees in Lebanon. Add to the 500,000, that makes it about 2 million refugees in a country that its population is 4 million. So half of our country now is of refugees. And they are in my country. They need help, education, health, food, care, all sorts of things. So when I took on this post, I started figuring out how can we put every child in school. And I realized that our budget does not allow it. Our country, our educational system is not at its best. It needs a lot of work prior to the crisis. We had to think outside the box. We had to think with the international community, what can we do? And then we created something called RACE, a program called RACE, Reach All Children with Education. And we started raising funds with the help of the international community to make sure every child enters a school. The most pressing point was to get kids in the school, in the classroom, because as time was passing by, some children were out of school for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. These children would have been a lost generation. Having a child outside a school for more than 2 to 3 years, it will be difficult to go back and take them back, put them in the classroom. So we created a double shift system. We started using every single school in the morning and then in the afternoon on a second shift to be able to accommodate as fast as possible the kids and put them in the classroom. The challenges that we faced were huge. First, the parents of the students, the Syrian refugee students, were not all convinced that their daughters should go to school. Some thought we can have them work and help us earn money better than putting them in school that doesn't pay us anything in return. These were the mentalities that we had to deal with. Add to it, when some schools had the refugees coming in, they ended up being 90% of the population in that school. So the Lebanese community also was feeling the pressure. 10% of the school is Lebanese, 90% of the school is Syrian refugees. So the Lebanese students started to leave and find another school. All sorts of challenges were there. Also, many parents did not have the means to send their kids to the school because they lacked transportation, or they could not feed them if they go to school. Others felt that they can put them, as I said before, in the workforce, put them to harvest potato in the Bekaa Valley. At the age of 7 and 8 years old, girls were making about $2 a day, and the parents were putting them to work there instead of taking them to school. So we had to think of all these issues and try and figure out how to put these children in school. The international community responded, donated a lot of money. The first challenge was to see if we can put 100,000 children in school. The Lebanese students in the government system, we have 250,000 children in the Lebanese system school. So the first challenge is to try and take on 100,000. We did it in year 1. The second year we wanted to go for 200,000. We went for 225,000. And now the third year of this program will start in September 2017. The challenges are, the funding from the international community is never enough. Here we have a system that's working, that's functioning. We have teachers that are ready to teach. We have the classrooms, we have the facilities, but we don't have the money to pay the salaries of the teachers or the running of the schools. When the international community comes together and decides to donate, they're always 6 months late for every academic year, once we know how many students we can accommodate. It all started as the refugees crisis. Everyone was interested, everybody wanted to help, until we reached a point where we all hear the word, the donors fatigue. Means there's another crisis somewhere else in the world, let's see where we can shift the money. What does that do to us? This will create a disaster in the education system in the region and in Lebanon in particular. Because we're building up these children, we're reaching the top of the hill. Once we're up there, if they leave us hang dry, we will drop. And the education system in Lebanon will be affected, and the Syrian refugees will be affected. Then we had to create social help for the parents, for the families. As you know, many of the kids, their parents haven't been even to school. Early childhood, early marriage is there. People left out on the street to find funds for the families, prostitution, potential recruits for terrorists, for terrorism. All these issues were on the table. We are still in the middle of this crisis in Lebanon. Now I left my post as Minister of Education and Higher Education. I am now advising the President on the international cooperation front and try to help as much as I can with getting more funding to help the refugees and help the host community to be able to host the refugees. We will be doing so. We will continue to do so. It is an obligation that we have to put every child in the classroom. But without the international community, without their help, without their commitment, without the long-term commitment, we will fail. And quite frankly, we already started seeing the decrease of funding for such crises. Now, I have to leave to go to Lebanon because we have a meeting with the donors, try to secure funding for these projects for the future. So I'm going to leave to go there for one meeting and come back to continue the conference here tomorrow. So we have to keep on running. As every morning rises, we have to think how collectively, how everyone can make a difference. How collectively can we work together to try and deal with the situation. Some of the stories I'll end with saying, after seeing today the Nigerian girls who were kidnapped by the Boko Haram, many of these stories I see on a daily basis in Lebanon. Many issues like that. One time, I got a phone call from a school principal who tells me a boy named Muhammad died in school, maybe 10 or 11 years old boy. He was sitting on the chair, decided to stand up and go to another room where his sister was to say hello out of the blue, and then come back, sit on his chair, and he died. So I called the father. I didn't know what to say, to see how can we help, only to hear his father saying, unfortunately, he had a heart problem since he was a child, and the parents were not even aware of it. 3 of his brothers were in the same situation, and the family is not aware of it. That's to tell you the situation they're living in. So the father was, I just want to thank you. At least you gave them an opportunity to be in the classroom. That was their dream, to go and study. So basically, if we do not act collectively to give these people hope, we will be losing an entire generation, and the international community, not just Lebanon or Syria or Lebanon, will be paying the price. The international community will be paying the price. I hope that you will all help us in raising those concerns wherever you are in the world. Keep on advocating for educating children wherever they are in the world. I want to thank you for listening, and I want to apologize from the panelists, but I'm sure that I will get the feedback of everyone's experience. Irina has been with us since day one, has been to Lebanon several times. Tariq also has been on many stages in the world and doing great work with Dubai Care to help in such situation. We loved your violin, and we loved to hear that's in your absence. He decided to play the violin because you were late, he said, but we were happy to see that. And I will leave you now. Thank you for listening, and hope to see you tomorrow at the other sessions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Boussab. That was a wonderful way to start our discussion today. I'd now like to hand the podium to Irina Bokova for her remarks. Thank you.
So it means next time I'm late again. If you're with me, bring your violin. It's really a very important debate. I was thinking this morning when watching and attending this wonderful beginning of the Global Education and Skills Forum, this time dedicated to the global citizenship. What a long way the forum and all the partners we have gone through. I remember the first one when we and Dubai Care, I think, were the only partners. Now we have a plethora of important NGOs, international institutions, educators, teachers, universities. It's so wonderful to see this momentum and taking over an issue which is of prime importance. I'm speaking about global citizenship education, the goal number 4 within the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, where we have fought all very hard to put global citizenship education as one of the targets. And at the beginning, people did not understand why it is important. Now I think we have not only better understanding, but we are deeply committed that without it, we cannot achieve sustainable development, we cannot achieve peace, human dignity, and human rights. And within this global, I would say, a vision and picture, emergencies and education and emergencies take an extremely important part. Just 2 weeks ago, I sent a mission to Aleppo to see at the very, I would say, first-hand and also at the preliminary assessment of what is happening. Of course, I put my other hat with the culture and the heritage and the destruction, which is a huge tragedy for humanity, but also to have a look at the educational institutions. And we know now that only 20% of the schools in Aleppo are functioning. We know that in these institutions, there are in a bench of 6 to 8 children that are sitting there, that are packing there, and parents are knocking on the doors of the schools in order to get their kids enrolled. I remember when I went in 2010, after the terrible flood and the earthquake in Haiti, one of the biggest concerns of families was, please, let our children continue their schooling. And this is where, in such a protracted crisis that we have seen in Syria, which has an impact not just on the neighboring countries, but on many in Europe, in the Middle East, and in other countries, our attention was once again attracted to the education in emergencies. We tend to forget that 90% of the refugees are in Africa, and I think this helps us also better understand what is the situation of these kids in the refugee camps, displaced people, scattered in either their own country or some others which do not have the access to education. And the consequences are quite dire. We know also that only 2% globally of the humanitarian aid goes to education. Now, European Union last year declared that they will increase it to 4%, and it was a very commendable decision that they have taken. But our experts know that in order to cope with the pressure, with the need to get kids in education, we have to dedicate 10% of the humanitarian aid to education. And with the global pressures, we know that, and the Minister Elias just mentioned in Lebanon, it is not just the refugees, it is the host communities, because this affects everybody. It draws down the education systems also in the host countries. And this is why we have to have a more holistic vision about why education cannot wait, which is the name of a fund, a global fund we launched last year in the Global Summit, the United Nations Summit on Humanitarian Affairs in Istanbul, with the Gordon Brown, Special Envoy of the Secretary General for Education, with a number of partners, in order to not get only funds to education, but also to make politicians and decision makers think about education in such situations. For Syria, 50% of the kids are not in primary, are only in primary education, and 25% are only in secondary education. The needs globally, when we speak about this fund, what are the financial needs? Our estimates that we need roughly $8 billion for 35 countries in order to make these children go to school. Now, what are the consequences? We know the consequences. The consequences is reproduction of poverty. The consequences is unsustainable development, destruction of the environment, destruction of communities, of societies, of fabric of these societies. It is, of course, affecting overall development. And finally, it affects peace and security. So I will stop here by saying that when we speak about education in emergencies, education in conflict, it is not simply a humanitarian concern. It is a concern about peace and security. And this was our message already in 2011, when we published for the first time, it was before the Syrian crisis, our global monitoring report on education, something that UNESCO is publishing on an almost yearly basis. The name of this report was Education in Emergencies, the Hidden Crisis. This led us to encourage the members of the Security Council. In 2011, Germany was the chair of the humanitarian group within the Security Council to adopt for the first time a resolution and to include education in their package, I would say, of children and conflict, and to put an emphasis in education. This is something that has to be taken seriously, and this is why this debate within the Global Forum of Skills and Education and the Global Citizenship Education is so important. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bokova, for drawing those links between the international issues of education and emergency, peace, security, and now global citizenship. We have Ron, who will be up next, who will provide us with a different flavor, a little bit more about a personal story and how I think you'll find this different deliveries and a sort of a fresh perspective on this issue. Over to you, Ron.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I just want to take a few seconds to do an exercise. Can we, everybody, say hello in your own language? And keep going the sound until I send you to stop. Yo, hello, hola, salam. Just say, keep the sound until I send you to stop. In the count of three, everybody, okay? 1, 2, 3. Hola.
Not fair.
Okay. Okay, one more time. But before that, I think, can we add some ingredient? And I think this ingredient that we have to add, it has to be no matter what religion, where you come from, what is your current situation is, or what age, or what is your language. Actually, let's add there energy, passion, love, and attitude, and also discipline. By discipline, I mean we have an instruction, we work as a team, and we develop our greetings, and we transform the life of the person next to us only with our hello. And in that way, I think we can make a really good impact. Let's do one more time, and remember to do with your heart. That's the most important, okay? 1, 2, 3. Hola. Yes, thank you so much. One of the things is, that's what I teach to my students. I teach them to be in focus, but also to be connecting with themselves. And at the same time, for me, it's an important, the music is not a sound of an instrument. For me, music is the sound of the heartbeats. That is actually how my life started. Circumstances, needs, and emergencies made my family strong. And overcome to the poverty and then challenge the many people facing Venezuela. And as actually, I was born in Caracas, capital of Venezuela, one of the most dangerous cities. And one of the things that the figures is like crime, violences, and corruption, and shortages of food and medicine are really high. And I'm not proud of this. One of the things is when I was young, my uncle disappears in a barrio. Barrio is like a danger neighborhood. And my grandmother, my mother, and my aunt decide to move from there and try to fight for us. We didn't own a house, so we are moving quite a lot for different places. And I'm the third of 4 siblings. And my older sister, she was abandoned in the house that we live. And even if it was not from our families, we didn't have so much, but it was a place for her. As in Venezuela, we always have kind of a place for help. And one of the things is I was moving quite a lot, and my grandmother was moving quite a lot, and we end up in a city close to Caracas, which is also a danger area. And my grandmother started a shop inside of the house. So I was, after school, I was selling chupi. Chupi is like the handmade ice cream. And it was the first time that I listened to Tchaikovsky, Mozart, and Sibelius. It was the first time. Because I was selling chupi, and I hear, because in front of my grandmother's house, it was at school of one of the powerful programs of orchestras and used for children's. It's called El Sistema. It started 42 years ago by Jose Antonio Abreu. And now he's inspired 65 countries, which engage in Venezuela almost 1 million kids. I started there in that school when I was 10 years old, and at 14 years old, I became a teacher. So I started to teach because part of the philosophy of El Sistema is that you have to use the music as a tool for social development, social integration, and you start to teach in a very early age, and that way you keep away from the vices and also for the crime and the many things that happen right now in Venezuela, but also in the world. Some years after, I can imagine that I was start to be the leader of the school when I was 16. And I was the director of the school when I was 18, and it was almost 1,000 kids. And it was incredible because I was looking back and I say, well, I can imagine that I was selling chupi and also was selling movies with my mom on the street. And we sometimes didn't have any food at all. And I remember as well one of the things that I remember with a lot of fun in my child, it was we was working in the weekends as a clown for party, and it made me a lot of happiness, and taking some furniture from the garbage to make a really living room. And now after see that and how been transformed my life, the music, how I can be an inspiration for many students and many children, and not only in Venezuela, also in the world, because after that, I started to become a trainee teachers, and I started to travel quite a lot and end up in north of Greenland. So I lived 3 years in north of Greenland, working with orphanage, kids who have traumatized problems with a lot of difficulties. And after Greenland and Umanak, you have to take normally 6 planes, 1 helicopter, 1 dog sledding to go to there. And a guy who never saw the snow is like, what is this? And how I can communicate because I don't have Inuit language, even I didn't speak Kalasleset. So it was incredible, but it was a good opportunity for me to develop the teacher skill to be a global citizen. Because after I visit Stockholm, I saw a lot of refugees arriving in the central station. And I was like, where they come from, what they are. And it was a lot of kids alone. And I was like, oh, we have to do something. And the only way that I know is with music. So I started a program, and I started orchestra. It's called Dream Orchestra. And this Dream Orchestra have a student from Syria, from Afghanistan, from Somalia, from Eritrea, from Iran, from Pakistan, and also immigrants from different parts to integrate them in the society to be integrated as a global citizen. One of the most important for me, I was thinking about how I can do this, even if I don't have the language. And I said, well, it will be difficult. I know that, because it's not easy to change the sound of a bomb for applause of the auditorium, or be embraced with the happiness when you just lost your family. And even they didn't know how to work with that deal. That's what I was visiting some refugees camp in Greece also to get where they're coming from, because I was coming from different education emergencies, but not as a word. So I was trying to get how I can help them. And one day before one concert, one kid from Syria, he's 14 years old, he came to me and said, Ron, I'm nervous for the concert. And I said to him, well, you be calm, no worry, just feel about how you go to give. And then at the same time I think, wow, this guy has been crossed the sea, has been living for 8 countries, moving, sleeping on the floor, out food, the family is in one place of the refugees, he's alone in Sweden, and he's nervous to a concert. It's because he's a child, and a child is we keep the focus on the child in the world are all the same. We just need to be focused on them, because sometimes the adults, we are really the problem sometimes. And so I think one of the most important thing is to how the music can be a powerful and important tool to integrate, but at the same time to help to be a better world. Because people are always thinking about change the world. Yeah, but I don't think it's change the world. I think we have to understand the world, look at the problem that we have, and how we can make better. That's just important, to transform a better life for many students. Another thing is, I always say to the teachers, they said really important, don't end any class until they engage to come back for more. Because that is the most important. Teach them respect, teach them diversity, teach them how the projects can be continued and sustainable. And I think that is the most important, because for me, education is the path of many and multiple destinies. But with that education, engage music, you can really develop in the spirit of people. For me, music in the time of work can really help people, but in the time of peace is love. So that's why El Sistema, for me, we always say that we sing, we play, we strive. But I think we have to strive for the one who need it, and we strive for their dreams and for their education. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ron. That was a very interesting presentation and a very interesting program, El Sistema. I'll have to remember that. I'd like to introduce Carlo Caramella from the World Food Program, who will share with you some of the experience of World Food Program with regards to education and emergency.
Well, many thanks. I'm really delighted to be here, to have the opportunity to bring stories also from the World Food Program, and to be part of this panel is really an extraordinary opportunity, and I would like to thank the organizers for inviting us to be here. I think we have heard already, let's say, very clear messages from the region, and the region in which we are, the Middle East, which is the region where I also work. It's a region that is known for conflicts at the moment, for humanitarian crises that are just changing the face of entire states, the face of communities, changing lives of people, changing lives of kids. Perhaps we have not clarified what the scale of this change is. It's a change that is unprecedented. It's not only the largest refugee crisis since the Second World War. It's an immense crisis affecting children. There are 23 million children who are either out of school or at risk of falling out of school in this region. That means a population of a country like Australia being floating in high seas, potentially losing access to education. And so if we look at that in perspective, we understand that we are dealing with something that has such criticality that definitely deserves the attention of the global community. Just a few days ago, one of the very well-known editorialists of the New York Times, Nicholas Kristof, was talking about Yemen, and on Yemen, a country that is now approaching a situation of pre-famine conditions, with 17 million people food insecure. Talking about Yemen, he was making the correlation with education. I was saying, well, is it not the case that perhaps had Yemen had a stronger educational system, we would not find ourselves in this situation. We would have not slided into war and conflict. Good question is a question that we need to ask ourselves, of course, for many other similar situations. So, going back to what we are, I represent the World Food Program working in this region. The World Food Program is known for its frontline responses in emergencies and in transitional situations. We fight hunger worldwide. We operate in 80 countries. We normally reach between 80 and 90 million people overall. In this region, reaching children and supporting them through their educational process is a priority. We are not leaders in education, but we contribute to ensuring that there is access to education for children in difficult circumstances. We do that, we do so through different means. One of these means is by making available food in very different ways, in different manners, in different schools, in public schools, in informal schools. And the importance of this is perhaps exemplified by a story that was told to me by a colleague from UNESCO, from the region. My colleague Maysoon from Lebanon told me a few weeks ago that she was interviewing a family, a refugee family in the Bekaa Valley in Lebanon, and she was asking why children were going to work and were engaged in child labor. And the mother, the single mother of this family, was answering, they are involved in child labor because we need to earn money. We have lost access to our incomes. We need to survive. We are struggling. And so my son asked them, well, what is the earning that they are making for a day of labor? And this single mother answered, it's their meal. So kids in the region, kids affected by war, by conflict, by disasters, by abuses, by violence in this region go to work because they have to earn a meal. Well, we from the World Food Programme side approach this problem connecting to the key actors on the ground, national institutions, local actors, teachers, parents, and of course a number of partners, including UNESCO, UNICEF, UNHCR, many others, and plan, by making available consistently and let's say in a sustainable manner food and snacks to kids in the most difficult circumstances. So we are supporting countries, we are supporting communities in a wide array of different contexts, from Syria itself, where we currently reach 350,000 kids in difficult circumstances, to a country like Egypt or Tunisia, where the governments are engaged in a reform of educational systems, they're engaged in a reform of their subsidy and social protection systems, and they're seeing the consolidation of these services as an extension of the state, as an extension of governance, an extension of institutionality, as a fundamental key to equity and inclusion. So this morning we were listening a little bit to a discussion about, a very inspiring discussion in plenary about inclusion and equity. Well, that's all about this. And when we talk about security and human security, it's about national leadership, and it's about understanding that at this moment in time we cannot afford anymore leaving people behind. We cannot afford anymore having fringe areas where there is no education. But investment on education is quintessential for the future, and we are not just globalized as human beings. We are globalized in terms of interconnections. A crisis in Yemen is going to affect Europe and America just alike. Let me close by saying that all this is to say that based on this, and based on the fact that we are currently reaching 2.5 million kids every day in this region, we have launched an initiative together with partners, including UNESCO and FAO and the League of Arab States and the World Bank and many others, that looks exactly at this, at how we can capitalize our investments, how can we have strategic and programmatic convergence in the countries in which we all operate, aligning our interventions, making sure that we can multiply impact, making sure that we target the same vulnerable people, making sure that our interventions result in not just in the sum of the different interventions, but in a multiplication of impact. And what is reassuring about this is that teachers, parents, local institutions, governments are all betting on the same. And as we move ahead with this regional initiative on school meals and social protection, we are certainly seeking new partners, and we hope we are going to make a difference scaling up from 2.5 million people to more kids reached in the region in the near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Caramella, for that, and for linking social protection and school meals. Plan International is also a big supporter of school meals as part of education programming. I'd like to introduce Rami Anis. Now you will require your translation devices, and please turn it to the English channel. Over to you, Rami. Thank you.
مرحبا. أنا رامي أنيس من سوريا، من مدينة حلب، عمري 25 سنة. لاعب سباحة. بسنة 2016 شاركت في أولمبياد ريو باسم فريق اللاجئين. كان لأول مرة بالعالم بتشكل هالفريق. راح أحكي لكم عن قصتي بسوريا وكيف غادرت من سوريا. Okay. مرحبا. أنا رامي أنيس من سوريا، من مدينة حلب. عمري 25 سنة. سباح. شاركت في أولمبياد ريو بسنة 2016 باسم فريق اللاجئين. كان أول فريق بتشكل بالتاريخ. راح أحكي لكم عن حياتي قبل الحرب وبعد الحرب. مثل ما بتعرفوا الحرب بديت عنا بسوريا بال 2011. فكانت حياتي كتير طبيعية. كنت اتمرن مع المنتخب السوري. شاركت بعدة بطولات. رفعت اسم بلدي سوريا. حائز على 3 ذهبيات على المستوى العربي، فضية على مستوى آسيا. فكانت الحياة كتير طبيعية. ما كنا نعرف، كنا نسمع بس كلمة حرب، ما نعرف شو معناتها الحرب لحتى عشنا هالشي اللي صار. تفتتنا، صار كل شخص في بلد. فبداية 2011 قررت اطلع على تركيا لكمل حياتي على امل تنتهي الحرب باسرع وقت وارجع على بلدي. فوقت غادرت بلدي كنت مفكر شهر شهرين 3 رح تنتهي الحرب وارجع كفي حياتي الطبيعية. لكن للاسف نحن صرنا بالسنة السادسة والاوضاع كل ما على اسوأ. فانتقلت على تركيا. التزمت مع نادي غالاتا سراي. نادي غالاتا سراي اقوى نادي في تركيا بالسباحة. فطلبت منهم اتمرن معهم، لكن كان عندهم مشكلة بتركيا انه ما عندهم نظام الاحتراف. ما فيني العب باسم النادي كوني مالي تركي. فوافقوا علي اتمرن معهم استثنائي تمرين، لكن من دون اي دعم، من دون اي مشاركات باسم النادي. فقلت اوكي خلاص انا بتمرن على هالفترة وبرجع على بلدي بشارك باسم سوريا. فكنت اتمرن فقط من دون اي دعم، من دون اي مشاركات. الفريق اللي كنت اسبح معه وكنت اتمرن معه هن يطلعوا بطولة انا ابقى لحالي. هن يطلعوا معسكر تدريبي انا ابقى لحالي بتركيا. فكان كتير شيء صعب بالنسبة لي كمل حياتي الرياضية من دون اي دعم، من دون اي مشاركات، مثل طالب عم بيدرس وما بيقدر يعمل فحص. فأصدقائي كتير كانوا يقولوا لي إنه خلص الحرب طولت، لازم تلاقي شغل، لازم تطلع حياتك، لازم توقف السباحة. بعد 2 من التمارين ما عم بتستفيد شيء. فضليت 4 سنين عم بصبر. عندي هالشعور إنه يوم من الأيام رح أحقق يلي بدي إياه ووصل لطموحي. فضليت لسنة 2015 نهايتها قررت اطلع على اوروبا. سمعت هنيك انه فيني كمل حياتي الرياضية في عندهم نظام الاحتراف. فطلعت على اوروبا عن طريق البلم من اليونان لصربيا، مثل كل اللاجئين اللي عم تسمعوا عليهم. كانت من أصعب تجارب حياتي. كنت أسمع بالطريق لكن ما أتوقعه بهالصعوبة. أنا كوني سباح كنت كتير خوفان من تجربة البحر. تطلع بالبلم، تلاقي الأطفال تلاقي الكبار معك بالبلم، الكل خوفان. ورسالتي للعالم يعرفوا الناس انه نحن لاجئين، عم نطلع من بلادنا، ما عم نطلع من اجل السياحة، ما عم نطلع من اجل المال، عم نطلع هربا من القتل، من القمع اللي عم بيصير في بلدنا. فأخذ الطريق معي حوالي 10 أيام، كانوا من أصعب تجربة بحياتي. ما نقدر ناكل أحيانا منيح، أحيانا نمشي على رجلينا حوالي 15 ساعة. فوصلت بلجيكا، قدمت على اللجوء، التزمت مع نادي في بلجيكا، مع تاني أقوى نادي في بلجيكا، وافقوا علي. فبداية 2016 رئيس اللجنة الأولمبية قرر يعطي 10 تذاكر ل10 رياضيين للمشاركة في أولمبياد ريو ويشكلوا فريق اللاجئين. فبالشهر السادس بال 2016 اختاروني واحد من 10 رياضيين للمشاركة باسم فريق اللاجئين. وطبعا هالشي كان فخر إلي كوني رح أمثل فريق اللاجئين، رح نمثل كذا علم في العالم. ما عندنا نفس اللغة لكن اجتمعنا كوننا لاجئين نوصل صورة للعالم انه نحن لاجئين، عندنا قدرات، عندنا مواهب، لازم نتابع احلامنا لنوصل للي بدنا اياه. فاختاروني واحد من 10 رياضيين للمشاركة في اولمبياد ريو. وطبعا هذا حلم كان لي وانا صغير انه شارك في اولمبياد. فضليت اتذكر الاربع سنين اللي كنت اتمرن في تركيا، انه ضليت اتمرن لو وصلت للي بدي اياه. حتى صار معي موقف لهلا ما بنسى في تركيا وقت كنت اتمرن. فرفقاتي السباحين الاتراك كلهم يزعلوا علي انه انت عم تتمرن ما في حدا عم يدعمك، ما في حدا عم بيوقف معك. فطلع رفيقي اجى من بطوله جايب لي قبعه السباح مكتوب عليها ريو، فاعطاني اياها قال لي هي هديه لك. فقلت له انه انا بطوله تركيا ما عم بقدر شارك، كيف راح شارك في اولمبياد؟ قال لي اي تذكار. فانا شاركت في اولمبياد ريو وهو ما قدر يطلع لاولمبياد ريو. فكانت تجربه كتير رائعه بالنسبه لي، كوني شاركت مع اقوى رياضيين العالم. مايكل فيليبس كان جنبي عم بسبح مع اقوى رياضيين، نفس القريه الاولمبيه، انظار العالم كلها علينا. فحسيت فعلا هالتعب كله اللي تعبته ما راح على الفاضي. فرسالتي لكل اللاجئين تابعوا حياتكم رياضيه، ما بتعرفوا ايمت بصح لكم الفرصه لتحصدوا الشيء اللي تعبتوا فيه بحياتكم. نحن لاجئين، في منا الاطباء، منا المهندسين، عنا مواهب، ما لنا فاشلين بالحياه، لكن الحرب اللي جبرتنا على هالشيء نطلع نكمل حياتنا. وهلا حاليا كمان اجتني منحه من اللجنه الاولمبيه لاشارك في اولمبياد طوكيو 2020. رح يكون عندي الدعم الكافي لحتى اجهز، وما رح اكون بس مشارك، ان شاء الله رح اكون من الناس اللي بيعملوا ميداليه في اولمبياد طوكيو. شكرا كثير.
Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. That was fabulous to hear your journey. We now have time for some questions from the audience. Can we first give a nice round of applause for our fabulous Global Citizen panels? If people have questions, they could please tell me who you'd like it directed to. And yes. And you can introduce yourself also. Caramella, yeah.
I hope you all heard me at first. My name is Ade Adegoke. I'm from Nigeria. I head a foundation dedicated to education in Nigeria, and I have one question, but it's about coordination. And I'm particularly Well, pleased. We're having mixed feelings about the last session that we held at the plenary, which also has implications for this session on the back to school, on the girls who were taken in Chibok. I see a large level of, globally, Syria is talked about, and at the same time, I also know Syria is not talked about enough because there's a huge need there. But in Nigeria, we have over 2 million kids who've left school and are in need. So it's not just the kids that have come up out of the Boko Haram crisis who've left the states where they are, but they've gone further down to southern states in Nigeria. They've also gone outside to very, very poor countries like Chad and Niger, and they're there, way over 2 million kids. I'd like to know how this is being coordinated. I'm Nigerian, you know, I hear lots of, when I say I hear, I see, and I'm part of that sector. Lots of international donors are trying to get a leg in, but also the level of insecurity that drives people back. And quite a lot of Nigerian organizations want to play a part of it, but at the same time, the level of coordination seems to be at an international level. So I want to know what's happening with regards to not just the WFP program for Nigeria, but then also the international donor organizations, what's exactly is happening at that level, because I know what local organizations are doing, I know what the local government is doing, but on a larger scale, what exactly is happening. And also to say that I know that there are coalitions of people, I know about the Oslo Home Conference, the coalitions of people doing things, but then I see a lack of coordination.
Okay, thank you very much for that question. Ms. Bokova, did you want to answer to that? Thank you so much. Is it not working? I think, yeah. Press it. Did you want to use the podium? Sorry about that.
Okay. I was in Nigeria several times. The last time I was last August. And until very recently, we had here with us, but she just left, the ambassador, permanent delegate of Nigeria, Ambassador Katagum at UNESCO. And I know that the out-of-school children are more than 2 million. At some point we were talking of higher figure, but we know the problem. And what is most important, the government knows the problem. And the government, as the president, are heading up towards very serious measures to tackle this problem. I think the most important is to have the governments accountable. We, from the international organizations and the United Nations system and others, of course, we can accompany, but the political leadership, ownership, I think is critical. And then, if we have this, in order to identify the causes, to see why these kids are not going to school, to create the respective enabling environments, we have been launching different programs, including with the World Food Program and other partners for the school meals, to create incentives for parents to send kids to schools, or to create a safe school. We have joined and strongly supported another initiative by Norway and some other countries, the Safe School Initiative. Already more than 60 countries are on board on this Safe School Initiative, because in such circumstances, talking about the Borno state or some others, what prevents children from going to school is security. In some cases, it's also about, speaking about girls' education, you mentioned it equally, to have women teachers, or to have sensitive teachers towards girls' needs. So it's a plethora of circumstances that we have to tackle. But I believe the most important is ownership, political will, leadership, resources, national and international, and us, as you said, working in coordination in order to have the biggest impact. I know it is a challenge in many circumstances, but I believe this is the only way to solve this problem.
Thank you, Ms. Bokova. If I could ask Mr. Caramella if you had anything to add, or
I think the explanation was really sort of very well done, very clear, and I have nothing to add. Of course, I have no details about Nigeria working in this part of the world, but What I know is that WPS established itself 2 years ago in support of and as part of the, let's say, coordinated UN response to the crisis in the country. And as you have heard, we are trying to work in partnership and collaboration. One of the key issues is accountability. And accountability and leadership is important also because, as we heard also from the former Minister of Education in Lebanon, emergencies are competing. We have competing emergencies, and there is a need to ensure that we provide all the possible sort of guarantees regarding the implementation of activities on the ground, and we provide guarantees regarding the ownership that the country can take of the problems vis-à-vis to a sustainable resolution in the future. Perhaps I can add one point. I think the issue at the end, and we go back to it, is poverty and exclusion. And I think we are seeing, throughout the world that this is a critical point, and this should lead us to re-examine a little bit how we relate to poverty and inclusion issues in our countries. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Algerg, would you like to add something?
Good afternoon. Is it clear? Yeah?
I think it's good, yeah.
I'm from Dubai Cares, and I don't know how much funding has come to Nigeria from the Middle East, but last year we championed education in emergencies, and we allocated $20 million towards education emergencies as a start for the next 2 years. One of our strategic partners is the IRC and New York University, and we have selected a few countries that we will support. I just want you to know that Nigeria is one of them, so we're supporting actually Niger. We're taking all the refugees that are going towards Niger from Nigeria because of the Boko Haram issue, and we're also helping the IDPs in Niger, and we're hopefully putting this whole program together to pilot a program for both countries, and so far we're going to benefit around 4,400 beneficiaries. It's an accelerated learning program that it's catch-up schools basically, and we're testing these models, and New York University will be conducting a big research to this to see how we can replicate this model into other countries and other conflicts. So trust me, from the Middle East, you guys are not alone. We thought of you, and this program is about $2 or $2.5 million that we have invested, and hopefully we will be looking into all the positive metrics. We will see what works, what doesn't work, so we can put all of this thing together. We're working with both organizations on different countries, but Nigeria and Niger is one of them.
Thank you so much. We have time for one short question, and if, yes, you could introduce yourself very briefly.
Hi, Elizabeth Dickinson. I'm a reporter with DevX. I was just in northern Iraq, and listening to Mr. Rami's comments was a great reminder for me that, at least as a reporter, many of the education and emergency programs that I've seen in refugee situations are very basic. And I wonder what's being done, what can be done to sort of draw out these real talent and sort of bring forward those who are excelling and already have the skills that they need that just need to be further developed. Thank you.
Anybody, Ms. Bokova, I think would be best placed. Thank you so much.
No, maybe there is a lot of experience, but I would just say, because you're speaking about talent, skills, and I think first it is very important once again to recognize that education still is not taken seriously in emergencies, and this is the reality. For different reasons. I think now the Syrian crisis and the protracted crisis, particularly of the Syrian refugees, reveal to us that if kids are 6 years out of school, it is a lost generation in the making. And there's a million of people, millions of young people who are not there. This is the one side of this question. The other is that when we speak about such instances, we speak about only primary education, something basic. And I have been in many camps. I have been in camps in South Sudan, in the displaced people in Central African Republic. I have been in, of course, in the more structured camps in Gaziantep, in Turkey last year. And I can say that it is a complex issue in a refugee camp in South Sudan to create all the enabling environments for children to excel. Language very often is a barrier. So you have to look at the languages. You have to look at the local context. I see now a prominent teacher from Greece who is teaching English in camps in order to give them opportunity for these kids. But it is not just English. It is about their mother tongue languages. And then I believe scaling up some of these activities that we are increasingly doing in refugee camps and insisting that in protracted crisis, secondary education equally should be taken seriously. As I said, from the Syrian crisis, only 25% of children are in secondary education. You can imagine what disaster for families, for communities, for the children that cannot continue. Then the other question is about non-formal ways of teaching. And this we increasingly promote also in order to make these kids be involved in the dropouts and in different other levels to be there. Of course, we know that this is not the, I would say, the ultimate solution of this problem, because it's a matter of diplomas, it's a matter of qualifications and then further on, but at least this gives, and adding to them skills, some form of technical vocational training for these young people is still a solution for them to continue with their lives. It's not a perfect solution, but matching formal, non-formal education, developing new type of curricula as we have developed, for example, in South Sudan, we have developed a very special curricular kind of a manual, a textbook, which comprises several grades, but still, and it was taken on board by our partners, humanitarian, UNICEF and others, still this is something that we give to these children in order to continue. And the non-formal plays a very important role in similar situations. So we have to be innovative, imaginative.
Great, thank you so much for your response, Ms. Bokova. We will now turn to the concluding remarks, so I invite Tariq Algerg to take the podium. Thank you.
Sorry for being the boring one to deliver a speech. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon. I would first like to thank Plan International for putting together this session and Barker Foundation for realizing how important it is to feature education in emergencies at the Global Education Skills Forum, as this theme is typically at the edge of international emergency response efforts. As we have heard from the speakers, this session is coming at the right time when the world is confronting an unprecedented level of risk and suffering associated with natural disasters and conflict. As you all know, education lays the foundations for success later in life, and it's very important that children all around the world have equal access to quality education to maximize their potential. Education in emergencies and post-crisis settings is also a vital pillar in creating robust and resilient communities directly linked to long-term issues related to safety, resilience, and social cohesion. Quality education must therefore be a fundamental right for every child, irrespective of his or her society, religion, nationality, and this right must be enjoyed at all levels. Being part of a global philanthropic organization working to improve children and young people's access to quality education in developing countries, I know that ensuring this right is a collective effort in order for us to respond to the challenges that conflicts and crises present to the continuation of education. We all have to come together, government, non-government, philanthropic, and private sectors. An example of such a joint effort in the coming together of Education Cannot Wait, which is a financing mechanism as explained by Irina, for education in emergencies that involves all the above mentioned actors in a joint effort to make a lasting change for the millions of children out of school due to conflict and crisis. As a global campaigner for education, Dubai Cares was part of the technical working group that was set up by political champions, Right Honorable Gordon Brown, UN Special Envoy for Global Education, Mr. Tony Lake, Executive Director of UNESCO, Mrs. Irina Bokova, Director General at UNESCO, and Mrs. Julia Gillard, Board Chair of the Global Partnership for Education at the Oslo Summit on Education for Development in 2015. The bold solution to the challenges for education in emergencies identified by this group was the creation of the Education Cannot Wait Fund. We were also privileged to be selected to be a member representing all private foundations at the high-level steering group for the fund. Apart from identifying global systemic solutions to the education deficit, we also identified changes that we could make through our programming. As such, Dubai Cares announced in October 2016, that's what I just mentioned to you, the allocation of $20 million for education in emergencies. The commitment will initially cover 6 programs in 6 different countries, with more being launched this year. I would just like to add that we have also supported a very similar organization in Peru called El Sinfonia. They're exactly doing what you're doing, so I applaud you for the same program that's happening. Look, to me, it's very sentimental. It's what's happening in the Middle East is something that I feel inside my heart. We were taught by Palestinians, Jordanians. I was born in 1974, so all our curriculum was from Kuwait. I still remember the textbooks which had the Kuwait country logo on them. And teachers were from Palestine, from Jordan, from Egypt, some from Syria, and they provided us with the best education, and where we are as a country today is because of them. We always thank them. And it's unfortunate what's happening in that region, because today it is that region which is suffering to get access to education. And the least thing we can do as a country and as Dubai Cares is to go back to the same people who has given us this education and provide them with the education that they have provided us 40, 50, 60, or 70 years ago. We also announced on the sidelines of the 71st UN General Assembly a research envelope worth $10 million, which we are hoping will generate more and better evidence to inform decision and policy makers on what works and what models of delivery of education in emergencies offer the biggest impact. Aside from its visible impact on school building and infrastructure, the conflicts in Syria, Iraq, Yemen, Libya, South Sudan, and Palestine have placed major obstacles in the path of children trying to pursue and complete their education, both inside the country and in the surrounding countries, where millions of refugees have found sanctuary. Attacks on education in these countries have killed hundreds of students, teachers, and academics, and injured many more. Hundreds of thousands of students have been denied the right to education when their schools and universities have been intentionally damaged or destroyed or used for military purposes. Children are our future. Therefore, their own future needs to be protected. It is only with quality education that other challenges such as poverty, extreme hunger, and poor health can be stopped. So we must act now. There is no time to lose. Educated children are at the heart of healthy, productive, and prosperous societies. If that is the future we want tomorrow, we must invest today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Algerg. With those concluding remarks, I would like to thank everyone for taking the time to participate in this discussion with us. with us. Just so that you know, there is a Global Education Skills Forum Alliance on the topic of post-conflict education and peace education, which Plan International will be co-chairing. So you'll be hearing more of this topic next year at next year's GESF. So until then, please do your part to ensure that learning continues in emergencies. Thank you very much.